So here are my two suggestions, knowing what's going to happen next and the 10 years ahead of how we might sell our media more effectively. First, I would advise that we take the long roads, and I'll explain what that is, and then I would advise us to play heavily on the advantages of integration. So let's start with the long road. I am a firm believer in the holy trinity of marketing. You segment, you target, and then you position. I always have been, and I'm a firm believer in it because it makes enormous amounts of money for the clients I work with. However, my arch nemesis, the evil dark lord of penetration, Professor Byron Sharp, makes the opposite point in his best-selling book, How Brands Grow. And he talks about sophisticated mass marketing in the sense that we should go after everyone. So targeting has become a really difficult challenge for marketers. You know, it began with Henry Ford saying, target everyone. I'm part of a traditional school that says segment and then target and make more money. And I'm not extreme. If you listen to what Facebook will tell you, with quite a lot of accuracy, micro-targeting at a granular level is now possible, and we're seeing the results thanks to President Trump and Brexit, and sometimes commercial results too. Professor Sharp would argue to take us back to a less targeted, more mass marketing place. And this is a genuine debate for most of the big clients in Australia right now. And so exactly a year ago, Byron and I had a debate in London over this very topic about mass marketing versus targeting. We got 5,000 marketers at the Festival of Marketing, and we went at each other 7 bells of shit, as we like to say in academic circles. Byron is not to be underestimated, and I think everyone was taken aback by the violence and lack of respect we both displayed for each other's thinking. That's what academics do. We're not as, you know, as lightweight as business people. We just get stuck in and then have a beer afterwards, although we didn't have a beer in this case. Anyway, I don't want to talk about the result because it's not important. I smashed him. I totally fucking smashed him. I definitely won. It wouldn't be fair to dwell on that result, but I did beat him like 2-1, 2-1, 5,000 people. Anyway, who's right then? When you look at this debate, should you target or should you go after everyone? And I think the winner of that debate and the answer to the question are these two old blokes here. This is Peter Field and Les Binet. Take a good look at them. They're about to own marketing for the next 10 years. They're old. They were old when I was young. They're old account planners from London. They are proper account planners, and they've been sitting on the IPA Effectiveness Awards in London now for about 15 years. That's every good bit of planning out of the UK. They've been looking at it, analyzing it, adding it to their database, what works and what doesn't work. And they've worked out a lot of important stuff. This will absolutely impact everyone, and I'm telling you now, it's the most important theory in marketing in a good 15 years. So, they wrote a book called The Long and the Short of It, which is worth a read. But more importantly, they discovered something in a single chart that we need to explore. So, if you look at the sales uplift of your marketing and advertising, and you measure it over time, there are two distinct trends. There's shorter-term sales activations, the sort of stuff you get from search, from retargeting, which you see a sudden splurge of conversion, and then it drops back, and then another splurge. You have to keep investing for it to deliver. And then you see a longer-term brand building growth, which takes more time to go, and which is more akin to using often TV or cinema and other things, more emotional. The point Field and Binet make is if you look at a 6-month window inside a company, all you see is the benefit of short-term activation. You never see the importance or power of long-term thinking, which is why the 4 out of 5 Australian marketers surveyed by Deloitte said that it wasn't important and why revenue growth was important. They're all too short-term to see the future. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean we don't do short-term. It means we have to balance long-term brand building, establishing the brand, and then short-term activation in the right threshold. The analogy I use is if you have a tree, we want to pick the fruit, but we also want to water the tree as well. Short-term picking of the sales, long-term feeding of the brand. If you start to pick too many fruit and you don't keep watering the tree, ultimately there aren't that many fruit to pick anymore. Short-termism in the UK is dramatically increasing in all of the work that Field and Binet see. Now, we don't have data for Australia, but I remind you that 2 years ago at the Effies, which is the most important advertising and communication award in Australia, the judges didn't award any long-term effectiveness prizes because, I quote, "we didn't get any long-term submissions." 200 submissions. No one had taken beyond a 12-month view. Yeah? So what that tells you is we have probably a worse problem here, I think, than we have in the UK. And while short-termism has increased, marketing effectiveness is now starting to drop off a cliff. No one tells you that in marketing conferences. It sounds like it's the fucking future, and some guy gives a speech, oh, it's the best time to work in marketing, programmatic, and ooh, artificial intelligence. Why the fuck are we getting so much worse than we were 5 years ago then? And the answer is because we are getting worse and more short-term. Now, here's the key point that no one's quite worked out yet, but it's about to become massive. The key point is if you drill down into Field and Binet, what they've also discovered is when you look at that short-term stuff, the activation, and you compare targeting customers, like a customer segment, or everyone or non-customers, the best response you get is by targeting very specific segments. So when you do activation work, you want to go after tight targets. But when you do that long-term brand building stuff, that's not the case. Actually, the best results you get are when you go after everybody in the category. What's the balance between the red and the blue? Well, according to all of their 15 years and more than 15,000 case studies, the optimum balance is 40%, or what they now call the 60-40 rule. 60% of your budget should be committed to long-term brand building, 40% to short-term activation. So the real winner of the debate last year was kind of both of us. It's kind of a points victory for Byron, unfortunately. 40% of a good brand's budget should go on more granular segments. It should be more targeted in approach. It should probably be going more towards digital because that is a more targeted medium. And it should be a rational, product-based annual approach. 60% of your budget should go on mass marketing. It should target the category. It should be brand-based and emotional. It should use TV, outdoor, news media, things that have positive wastage. And you should be looking at doing that for many, many years. If you actually look at the breakdown of these things, as you can see here, the average number of very large based effects, you'll see that there are certain media which are good at short-term stuff, SMS, inserts, direct TV, online, search. And there are certain things that are much better at long-term stuff, sponsorship, PR, radio, magazines, TV, outdoor, cinema. You've got 60% of the pie, yeah, if you play your cards right. And in the most recent research from Les last week, he thinks in many businesses, particularly those that spend heavily on advertising, it's not 60-40. Many businesses should be more like 70-30. So the long road gives you an opportunity. The long road says you can and you should have a big share of that pie because it fits what news media, what TV, what outdoor and radio can do. My final point, though, is integration. Digital is now the dominant investment in most countries, which means that we're a minority player, which means that you're no longer fighting against a minority foe. You're now trying to get scraps from their table. And that's not necessarily the worst place to be. There's no doubt what is the best campaign in the United Kingdom this year and what will win every effectiveness award at the end of the year. It's the campaign for KFC. When KFC changed their distributor earlier this year, unfortunately that distributor discovered they weren't much good at delivering chickens. And that resulted in a 3-week absence of chickens from KFC all over the UK, which resulted in interviews with a whole host of British people who really shouldn't be eating fried chicken, complaining that they wanted to eat fried chicken. In response to that, the very talented chief marketing officer at KFC did this. She ran full print ads in all the major British newspapers saying FCK, fuck, right? And then apologizing. And she did it in such a decent British fashion that people suddenly said, you know what, we understand, get the chickens back, we forgive you. This is the story of news media overnight turning around everything. Except it's not. probably only about 15% of the people that KFC were trying to reach saw those newspaper ads. Most of them saw it reflected in social media. The interaction of the authority and newsworthiness and trust of newspaper advertising was then reflected in the targeting, in the ubiquity of social media. 1 × 1 =